And welcome back to Grow Your Grass Off. Brandon, what's going on, bro?
I am enjoying planting. I have created a new bed and I had tomatoes, cilantro, basil in the ground. I got some of the herbs in the ground, so I'm really excited to see kind of what takes. Transplanted some Brazil spinach and need to harvest some turmeric. So I've got some projects still to do. Still have more cassava to harvest. But yeah, I've been really it's drying up here, so things are really getting a lot of sun and the trees are responding. Some of the trees that sort of had some issues, I can tell they're coming back. So they're getting some good growth and they're enjoying the sunshine. So that's me. Lana, what about you?
Not much. My little chicks are 2 weeks old, so they're, yay big. Introduced them to their sisters yesterday, and I've just been wrapping presents, and I'm not using paper this year. So I got some thrifted fabric, some holly from outside and twine. This is actually a pillowcase that I just made into, cutting. Bunch of different thrift store fabrics and different sizes and shapes. I'll reuse them. So I decided I wasn't going to do paper and tape this year. And my family's excited about it. So I think that's kind of fun. So that's about it. What do you have, Kev?
Well, actually, I don't have much going on right now because it's winter here. It's going to get really, really cold next week, so I'm going to have to run the heater in the greenhouse and bring everything in again that is outside. But what I do have going on is actually what the show is mostly about today, which in my basement, I still have my black soldier fly bin going, and I've set up a little breeding tent for them, and we'll see how that goes. But I'd like to go ahead and introduce our very special guest today, Doug Knipple. And he is the owner of Northwest Redworms. And welcome, Doug. All right, so I am super, super excited about our show today. We have Doug Knipple with Northwest Redworms, and I'm a huge fan of his work. And I'll just let Doug tell everybody about himself and what he does, and then we can open it up to questions. Welcome, Doug.
Hi,
Yeah.
Doug.
Thank you. So I've been doing Northwest Redworms now for 15 plus years. And, this business has always moved kind of with whatever the climate was. The redworms and castings got really big probably 5, 10 years ago, back in the marijuana craze. And that has actually died off. And during COVID, the last 2 years, the redworms got really heavy, but the black soldier fly got even bigger. My food supply the past year has gotten really, really limited, and unfortunately that hurt the redworm business a lot, because prior to that I was doing about 60,000 pounds a week composting with the redworms, and now food waste wise we're getting 1 to 4,000 pounds a week. But as far as the larva business that I do, I collect 2, 3 thousand pounds of spent barley every week, and that's mostly 90% plus of what I run my larva business with.
Wow.
So yeah, it's getting big, and that's why we're creating the new business, Insects at Large, for a different clientele, and also the frass that we get from the insects. I have learned that is actually works a lot better than castings. Castings is a really good base for soils. It's awesome. I wouldn't never not use it if that's proper. But adding the frass has increased my fruit production so much that I've just really been impressed. I actually was afraid to use it at first, thinking it'd be too strong or just wouldn't do anything. And so far, I've been really impressed.
Can you explain that a little more, Doug, as far as what that is?
Oh, the insect frass is the waste from the insects. So I say insects. I do 95%, 90% black soldier fly larvae, but we're also getting into mass mealworm production and a couple other insects for reptiles, which is superworms and dubia roaches. Eventually, there'll be a few more different insects, but like I say, the main insect so far is black soldier fly larvae, and they produce, well, out of the, say, 100 pounds of food that I give them, I'll get 10 pounds of frass, and the rest will become protein fat that the larva turns into. So the frass itself is really concentrated fertilizer that I wasn't all sure. See, I've always assumed that the frass from the insects were more nitrate, but I used it on my cucumber garden this year, and the fruit produced 3 times more than it would have just by adding a little bit of frass into the garden.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How do you get it? You've got spent barley, you said, and so it's kind of a mixture of things inside of that.
The spent barley, well, yeah, there's sometimes it'll be cracked wheat and some oats, sometimes rice. It all depends on what recipe they're using, but it's pretty much mostly barley.
And so you get that from a local brewery?
Right. I've been actually working with the brewer almost as long as I've been doing Redworms. And they've gotten bigger, fortunately, because I use more a lot these days.
That's cool.
That's great. That's amazing.
What brewery do you work with?
Lewitt, they're a microbrewery. They have their own little specialty. They're not nationwide at all.
Yeah, say it again.
Lewitt. Lowitt.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look out for it.
And so I'm curious about, like, you get the waste from the insects and you have to somehow, run water through the grains or whatnot in order to get it sort of in a compost tea, or how do you apply it to your garden, let's say?
Well, that was probably something I would have showed you if I could have brought the video in the building. So the nice thing about spent barley is it's drained. There's still some moisture in it. The grain itself is very moist, which gives the insects enough moisture along with the grain for them to eat. And I feed them sometimes every day and sometimes every other day. But so basically, the larva will eat everything except for the carbons. So when they're done, it's husk and frass and larva. And all I need to do is brush the top of the soil or of the compost, and the larva will go down, and I can keep scraping off husk and frass all day long until I get down to just larva. And that's pretty much all I do. After that, it goes out. And, I mean, I can sift the frass, I can refine and get the husks out, but I'm finding that the husks are great for the soil too, just as a good aggregate. So
that's great. I know there's a guy in Santa Rosa, California, that owns a company called Boogie Brew that does compost teas and whatnot. And he's a huge, huge fan of black soldier fly larva frass. And I actually have bought some of that from him back in the day when I was more container garden oriented. That's really great. So, I mean, for everybody that doesn't know black soldier fly larvae, and I'm sure I've talked about them on this show before, they're just these incredible creatures that convert, organic waste to grubs that you can feed to chickens and ducks and reptiles. And their conversion rate is just astounding to me. The more I work with them, the more I'm just amazed at what they can do. And then here, you're saying you're getting this incredible fertilizer from them as well. And I have a question for you about the leachate. So in my bin, I pour out the leachate either daily or every other day. It's like this dark liquid. Have you ever used that in your garden and had any sort of results, or is there any issues with that?
Well, with the spent barley, I don't get any leachate.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I know how most soldier fly bins. When I first started, I had a lot more moisture because I was throwing in a lot of produce, and eventually I'll get more to that. But no, my larvae. There's so many larvae in my bins; they will almost suck it dry every day.
Wow.
So it's all in the frass, and then the frass itself. I mean, I can add a cup of my frass to a gallon or 5 gallons of water, and it'll be just as dark almost as the leachate that you're talking about. It's so concentrated, and you can probably leach it out 2 or 3 or 4 times, and then I would still use it as an aggregate in the soil.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And so I'm just curious about your business, because you do lots of different things, redworms, different insects. Like what's your best seller?
The larva, by far.
Either mature or immature, for people that are raising their own black soldier fly larvae, or for them to feed their chickens or whatnot.
Depending on the time of year, the clientele are completely different. Like I just shipped off 700,000 small larvae day before yesterday to Flukers, which is down south. They're I'm not even sure what they do, but they wanted 1 million larvae. I gave them what I could, and then yesterday I shipped off 200,000 medium and large larvae to one of the bigger internet vendors, feeder vendors for reptiles. So it's all sorts of different things. In the next couple of months, then I'll get the customers that are starting it up for the year for their chickens or however they want to grow their larvae. It changes constantly.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm just like enamored with these creatures. I think they're just the coolest thing ever. And I mean, I have a little just bin. It's an old school worm factory bin, and I harvest. The only thing I feed the grubs, as we call them, is just our food waste from the kitchen. That's it. They get nothing else, and they are able to handle all of it, even in this little bin. And I just the darker ones that self harvest. I give just handfuls every day to my chickens and ducks, all from this little bin. It's just insane. And I'm sure I'm not doing it, a fraction of as efficiently as you are, having dialed it up like that. So
yeah, how big?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
How big is your warehouse where you have all of this going on?
Well, the larvae are in the bottom floor, probably half of the bottom floor, a little less. And so that's 20 by 30. And I just moved out of a trailer that I've been in before the warehouse was built. Actually, I have a little bit still in there. I'm trying to get them moved. And it was a 48-foot truck trailer that I ran out of I probably earned more from that truck trailer than I did from the whole 10-acre farm while I was running it.
Wow.
Wow.
So all my fly breeding have been indoors for the past 10 years, probably.
I've got a question for you, Doug.
Yeah.
So I've got a little pond here that just started out with tilapia, and I'm wondering, because my neighbor does the soldier fly for the chickens, is there an easy way to, like you described a little bit, how you can kind of, take away the husk and stuff, and then you're left with just the larva, right?
Yeah.
What is there a good way? Because I don't want to dump a bunch of things in the pond per se, in terms of other things that I don't, really want to clog it up, kind of thing. So do you know of a good way to kind of just isolate that, the larvae themselves?
Yeah, I actually screen them because you would to feed your large larva, and I use a 3/16 screen. I use several different size screens because I ship off several different size larvae. But for the large larva, I use a 3/16 screen, and the large ones don't fall through that. And pretty much all the debris, unless it's larger debris, you can pick that out. But since I use barley, it all goes through except for the larva. This is how I ship them.
Okay.
This is what I had left over from yesterday's shipment. And I just fed them. This bin is what I keep in here for the dragon. So this is my bin. This is what all my bins look like. And you can see I had thrown a little bit of produce in here. But let's see. It's relatively dry. I mean, the barley, the nice thing I like about the barley is it's really clean.
So there's a benefit of the barley, and then the food scraps on top just adds to that, diversity in what they can eat then, right?
Sure. So like if I just sort of ruffle this a little bit, the larvae will go down. They go down really fast, faster than harvesting worms. And once there's no movement, I'll scrape a 1/2 inch off and then let it sit for another minute. And I'll scrape it down to pure larva. I mean, right now you can't even see them anymore.
I'm just curious, Doug, you don't have to go on a long tangent here, but if you're comparing this to worms that are sort of in a typical vermiculture setup, is it both of them are different, or is it one is better than the other in your opinion, because if we have extra food scraps and we can create food for ducks or for fish, that seems like a nice stacking of functions for me, but what are your thoughts there?
So on the scale, there's a pyramid of value, I guess is what they call it. If you have food waste, it goes to the food banks first, and then if it can't be used at the food banks, it'll go to farmers. After the farmer, to go down further down the pyramid, the black soldier flies are higher on the list than redworms because black soldier flies are a bioconversion. You're converting your waste into mainly protein. You do get a frass from it, but the frass is fractional compared to the amount of protein and oil and calcium and all the good things that you get out of the black soldier fly itself. So the redworms, they basically convert. The nice thing about the redworms, though, is they convert everything. All your fungus, all your bacterias, and all your sugars from the food waste, they convert that to a compost. And the black soldier fly doesn't necessarily eat the carbons. So that's where the black soldier fly comes out short, whereas the redworms can finish it all. But black soldier flies are still higher in the chain because you could extract them out and use them. And then you could give the rest of it to the redworms. Was what your question was on how they are on the chart?
That sounds great. Yeah, I never looked at it that way. That's awesome.
So my understanding, and Doug, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that redworms, they really like cellulose and lignins, and those are the things that the black soldier fly don't really eat. Is that correct?
It's correct that the black soldier fly don't eat them. The redworms don't really eat them either. What the redworm does is it consumes the fungus and the bacteria that break down everything in the compost. I mean, the redworms will eat the sugars and juices from the waste, but they don't necessarily chew anything either. Their gizzard breaks things up, but it's mostly the fungus and the bacteria that break down the compost, and then the redworms take it from there. So they're like the compost managers that consume it after everyone else has consumed it.
Right.
Whatever makes your compost soft is what the redworms do. Now the larvae, they chew. They'll dig right into anything they can eat, but they just don't eat the carbons.
Right. We actually had some chicken feet that we used to make a broth, you know, and you boiled it forever to get that rich broth from the chicken feet. And then we put that in and they actually ate that till it disappeared completely. It's all gone. There's no trace of these big rooster feet that were in the grub bin.
Really?
Yeah. If there is, if there's a trace of it, I can't find it.
Right. Well, when I separate the frass from the husks, the frass is very, very light. And now with a food waste, it'd be a lot more dense because it breaks down so much more. But in the barley sense of it, there's even some carbons in the grain itself, and so that comes out in the frass. So they'll consume it. They don't generally digest it that much, though. Mm-hmm. That's probably why you still get 5% or so waste from them, because they don't necessarily eat everything or digest it.
Right. I mean, they're like, I sometimes, you know, I think about it's like having pigs. You know, you can feed all your food waste. You can feed pretty much anything to a pig, including spent barley from breweries. There's a local farmer that farms pigs that picks it up from the local brewery here in Nashville. But grubs are like, you know, pigs without having all the have to have all the space for a pig. I mean, they're like, you know, the pigs of the insect world. In my experience, you can just give them anything and they love it.
Yeah, I used to call them the compost piranha because that's basically how I see them working in the compost.
Right. That's totally, I love it. Compost piranha. So could you tell us a little bit, what is your insects at large? How is that going to be different?
It's so people who are looking for insects don't generally come to a redworm website. Mm-hmm. So that's why I created Insects at Large. The reptile people see the name and they don't go any further because they're like, well, I don't want any redworms. So I'm just creating a sub insect website for that. The same for chickens and people with fish.
Okay. Have you heard, one time I was at a pet store years ago and I saw this product called calci worms, and it's like, you know, high calcium worms for reptiles that like, you know, high calcium, and it was just black soldier fly larvae and they were half dead and there was hardly any of them in there, and it was very expensive.
Right. The calci worms and the phoenix worms are black soldier fly. They're patented names.
Wow. No, wow. I mean, and it's just, you know, I saw how inferior that product was because I had been ordering from you, and I'm like, wow, it's like, I can't believe they sell this. Or maybe it was just that batch at the pet store. I don't want to diss the company because I don't have that much experience with them, but it's just a testament to how healthy, you know, everything I've ever ordered from you has been. When I used to get redworms from my bin, I mean, like there were so many of them. They were so healthy. It was great. So I've always recommend your site for ordering redworms and grubs for that reason. And I ordered, you know, from you in this past spring, and my bin's still going in the basement. And even though we've had, you know, 20-degree weather here.
Yeah.
I got a question for Doug. Like Kevin's saying, in his basement, he kind of needs to create a little bit of a zone that they can flourish in. I'm curious about temperatures, or about, you know, the flies needing to kind of mate and then lay eggs again. Can you talk about that process? And is there anything special that you need to do? I don't want you to divulge any secrets or anything, but can you talk broadly about it?
I don't have enough time to tell you all my secrets. Because it's amazing how difficult it can be inside. You basically want 50% humidity, 85-degree temperature, and some kind of breeding light, which is as close to daylight as you can get. And there's daylight lights. That's where you get started. All right. And then from there, it's a matter of trial and error. I've worked with thousands of people on them getting their indoor breeding working, and they don't always get it. And it happens to me too. When I'm setting up my tents that I've designed, sometimes they don't work. When the temperature changes outside, my beds will stop working inside the warehouse. That's how touchy it is. And I'll have to sit and figure out, okay, what one thing changed, or two things even changed, to get them to start laying their eggs again, or to not die so fast, or to get a better egg hatch rate, or to get a better egg laying rate, or actually to get them to lay the eggs in the right container.
Wow.
So there's a few tricks. This last week, we went to a place called Chapul Farms, Chapul. They're trying to. They're starting a pilot program to design a 200-ton a day facility for black soldier fly.
Oh, wow.
They're currently only running on grants, and their grants are running out, but they have their design. So we went and visited that the other day, and it was nice. It was in a warehouse like mine. It was more wide open. They kind of had everything in one room, where I have a lot of separate rooms just to avoid problems. But it's interesting because they're trying to capture the city waste or the county waste programs. So they're making a pilot scenario, and then they're going to try and sell that. Unfortunately, they're trying to sell it for $60 million. But
wow.
But the money's supposedly out there right now. I don't know. It's interesting how many different ways you can go at it. The way I've done it was I basically started from finding black soldier fly larvae in my worm bins and actually getting scared that they were going to take over my worm business. And they didn't.
And they did, probably.
Yeah. In a different way than you thought.
They did in a good way.
Yeah. So cool.
They try and make you think that the larva can be grown from hatch to full size in 2 to 3 weeks, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. They can be grown real slow or rapidly. And for a lot of people, they're discouraged because they're afraid of failing. When you buy insects from a store, like you had said, they're usually in bad shape. They've probably been harvested 2 to 3 weeks, and they're starving. So there's a lot of different things to know about larvae. They are tough. I've shipped out larvae and got them back 3 months later, and they're still alive, and they were in absolutely no food for 3 months.
Wow.
So they're pretty tough. That's one thing I really like about them. They consume hundreds of times more than worms do. And the older I get, the less I have to do with these guys than I had to do for the redworms. So that's a good thing for me.
Right on. It's amazing how resilient the grubs are, but how finicky the adult flies are.
Oh yeah. Well, if some people are thinking about hiring me as a consultant, and one of the first things I want them to learn is to understand the breeding part of it. You literally have to think about, you have to think like the fly. So the female fly has 8 days. It takes 4 days to mature, so she's got 4 days left to lay eggs. She's got sensors that can tell her if the humidity and the temperature is right enough for her eggs to survive. And if they are, she will lay the eggs. And that, to me, means a lot. You could sit and try and figure out the externals, but if you think like the fly, you'll realize it's all about that one little spot where she lays the egg. And if that's right, you'll get lots of eggs. So that's my My best secret I can give you.
Secret.
So in my little setup, I just started it recently in the basement, and I've got like 45% humidity and it's like 74 degrees. Do you think that's not going to cut it?
Possibly. When you're saying room temperature 45 degrees, what
the humidity is 45%.
45%, yeah.
Is 74 degrees. Sorry.
Right. So in that, it's real close to what you need, and you would probably get a 30% egg-laying rate, all depending on the amount of light. I had read somewhere that they want 4,500 lumens. So that's pretty bright.
That's really bright. I don't have that.
Okay, so the lumens is for the breeding. The humidity, the temperature, and the humidity is to extend their life the full 8 days, and it's also for the egg laying. And then your temperature, 81 degrees is the optimal egg development temperature. Below that, it goes real slow, which means it could dry out before they hatch. Above that, actually accelerates them. The hatch time is normally 4 days, and if it's a little higher temperature, they'll hatch in 3.5 days.
Wow,
it's interesting how versatile it all is.
This is amazing knowledge you have, that all the experience you've accumulated. This is very important, I think, for what a lot of us are trying to do, and grow our own food and teach people to grow their own food, and divert waste streams into something productive. I think this is incredible.
So I have a question for Brandon. You want to use it to feed fish?
I'm considering, yeah, I've seen different designs. Maybe there's a plank, you can have the grubs or the worms kind of crawling out, and then they just sort of drop into the pond per se. That was the thought I had. But yeah, tell me what you think would be the best. I think.
You could have your bend where the ramp drops right into the pond. Mm-hmm. The thing is, okay, so when a larva crawls out to pupate, its shell is a lot harder, and it's harder to digest.
Okay.
So you may want to feed them younger, full-size larvae that are still not pupating. I would think that'd be better for the fish as far as digestion. Same with, chicken. See, now in reverse, the chickens the pupa would be better because the calcium's all in the shell, and their gizzard will grind it up.
What's the difference? I don't know enough there in terms of the stage. When can they? How would you design it? If that's easy to visualize. How do you design it differently for those two types?
Oh, so what I use the crawl out for the pupa, I'm usually turning the pupa into flies. I'm not necessarily feeding those out unless I'm going to throw some to the chickens. If I was feeding fish or reptiles, I want to use the younger larvae that are not about to pupate, because they're basically just a soft skin instead of an outer shell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when the darker ones that he's describing, the pupa, they're the ones that will self-harvest, like out the ramp or whatnot. And that's right. What I use for my chickens. But that's really interesting to know. Yeah, they're higher calcium. That makes total sense.
Right.
Have you ever seen any statistics or have any experience with how much of a chicken's diet can be these black soldier fly larvae?
I get that question a lot. Can I completely feed my chickens black soldier fly larvae? And I'm like, absolutely not, because that would be way too much protein. As a matter of fact, if I give my chickens, if they get 2 or 3 larvae a day, because I have several hundred chickens, their eggs, the egg yolks are almost orange. It doesn't have to be a big part of their diet. Chickens are all about the amount of protein they get for the day. And that's why chickens are given a scratch for them to eat, which has no value. Like spent barley, they'll eat that. And it has really no value. It's just a filler. Because if I let the chickens like jump into one of my larva bins, they'll eat $500 worth of larva before I can get them out of there. So, and they don't need it. It doesn't do them any good. So, yeah, you don't have to feed them much at all. And I imagine fish might be similar. I don't know anything about fish.
It makes sense to have a balanced diet. Yeah, because from what Kevin says, they're super high in fat, so it makes sense to me. You wouldn't just feed them straight.
Right.
Yeah, I think I've been feeding my chickens a lot more than that, because I only have a few chickens. Oh, and my duck actually eats more of them than any of the chickens. Ducks,
right. Yeah, my ducks are faster and more aggressive, and my peacocks too.
Right on. Have you ever eaten them yourself?
No, but I hear they taste like bacon. That's what I tell everybody.
There's the pig thing again. They're
There
the
you
pigs of
go.
the insect world.
That's funny.
I haven't eaten them either, but I thought about, if the crap hit the fan, it's like, okay,
So
nutrition.
for eating insects, actually any insect, if you dip them in hot water, they expel all their waste, so they're clean. So if you want to eat an insect, you want to dip them in hot water first. Just a safety thing.
Yeah, that makes me curious too. Have you seen anything, Doug, as far as, crickets being part of protein bars and things like that? Have you seen a precedence for, soldier fly larvae being a part of any culture's diet historically or anything like that?
I've had people come and buy a lot of different insects I have just to eat them. But as a matter of fact, Chapul Farms, the one I told you about, that's how they got started. Was they went to Shark Tank with a candy bar made of crickets, which actually one of the people in that show actually bought into their. If you go to their website, you'll see they did back them and they did produce their cricket bar, but the business failed in America. So okay. I think they still sell in other parts of the world, but it failed miserably in America. We're not ready yet.
Yeah.
What's next for you, Doug? I mean, you got any exciting projects you're working on besides the insects at large?
Well, one of the main reasons I built the warehouse wasn't just to produce more black soldier fly larvae. Well, in a full spectrum way. I was approached by a person who wanted, what he was going to do was he was going to build all these different larva growing facilities, and he needed a place that could produce the eggs and small larvae. And so my warehouse was originally going to be just for egg production. And then I was going to sell the small larvae out to farms at a good rate, so we could have mass consumption of food waste and mass production of larvae. But that didn't pan out as well as I'd hoped. So I'm still building that. What's probably going to happen before that is the insects at large is going to get a little bigger, and we'll see what goes from there. I am talking to the county about doing the county food waste, but they're not quite ready to do it here because of the fact I have a redworm farm and I have a lot of waste laying around. I have to clean up the farm before they'll look into giving me some grants to build up the black soldier fly business. But that's in the future news. So
that seems like a perfect, permaculture type of business in my mind, where
right.
you can, your inputs and your outputs and all that good stuff, you can really turn it into profit, really, like your model.
Right. It just like any kind of food waste disposal or consumption, it's expensive to do just one part of it. Part of the plan that would have made that economical would get a tipping fee for the waste coming in, and then the byproducts, selling the byproducts out, because there's a lot of labor in between the two. And the county wants to find a way to split that up, and currently that doesn't work, at least not as far as I can see right now. That's one of the main holdbacks right now.
Okay.
And do you do everything yourself, or do you have employees or help?
I've had a lot of employees during this last 2 years. It's been really tough to keep one or two even. And if I have them, they're usually part-time. I have one person right now who comes in 2 hours a week, and pretty much the rest of it I do myself.
Wow.
So I've cut back a little bit. That's why I don't do the 60,000 pounds of produce anymore a week.
All right on. Well, Doug, thank you so much. I mean, I don't want to keep you anymore. It's been 45 minutes, but this has been great, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Doug.
Yes, thank you.
And you guys will post this on a YouTube channel?
Yeah, as of now, it's on YouTube only. Other platforms are probably coming soon, but it's called Grow Your Grass Off.
Okay. I look forward to seeing it.
Yes. Thank you, Doug.
Sure.
You know, it's like you do something so often, you kind of lose the amazement of it. I mean, like the first time I ever grew food, I was just like, oh my gosh, I grew this and I get to eat it. It's like a spiritual experience. I changed my mind and, you know, changed my life about everything. And now, of course, I eat food that I grew all the time. And don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's not necessarily, you know, the super exciting thing for you. And what I would, you know, I wanted to talk to him for a long time, but when I was in California, even though, you know, it's a warm area in California, the nights are always cold. That's just the way it is there. And I didn't have nearly the success in growing them as I have here in Tennessee. And because in the summer, it's like a tropical rainforest. They really like hot, humid weather. And since I've been here, I've been so successful at growing them that I'm like, my enthusiasm for them is, you know, experienced a resurgence. And I just, until you can see how you can turn every bit of your compost waste into, because I get leachate from that. And then eventually when they're all done, I'll get frass, but mine's not all dry like his. But when you see how you turn like every bit of that into food, you know, whether it be for ducks, chickens, fish, whatever, potentially for you at the, you know, crap hit the fan, I've never seen anything like it. Like,
do you have a lot of flies? Like, I feel like there would be.
Oh, you mean like house flies?
Like gnats, you know, like fruit flies.
You know, occasionally I'll have a little bit of fruit fly stuff, but not really more than I have in my kitchen, which is having bananas out.
Right.
And last year I did get a bunch of house flies because I let the bin go putrid. So if your bin is healthy and clean, you won't, the grubs will actually repel other insects and creatures.
It kind of looked like he had some sort of pine clippings in there.
That's just the barley husks.
Okay.
So that's the thing, is that it's a lot trickier to grow them super clean when you're not bringing in like spent barley. So like that spent barley from the brewery, just like our guest, you know, Todd, you know, in Costa Rica there, your neighbor Brandon was using, it's like the perfect thing to like raise them. But you know, if you don't have access to spent barley from a brewery, you know, the idea is that, I want to compost my own kitchen waste and do it very efficiently. So I actually do sometimes put in some bedding to kind of sop up the moisture, because it gets too moist, it can get stinky. But I mean, it doesn't really smell. It's only if the bin has a problem does it have a smell. And a lot of clients I've talked to that have tried them, like, you know, it didn't work or whatever, because they don't care for them in the right way. Like I probably spend, I would say 3 minutes a day on average with my bin. That's it. You just got to get it dialed in right. You know, you got to have the right bin. You know, Doug in Northwest Redworms has a biopod, or I think he makes his own, which is like a design specifically for black soldier fly larva raising, and, you know, follow those instructions or whatever. But, you know, I have my own little system that I developed with my old worm farm. and how you can like stack the layers and they move through the layers. And so what I would do is I'd put that out for my chickens in the summertime, and they would just dig through there and eat a ton of them. Of course, maybe they were eating too many, but chicken's super healthy. And then, there's all the ways to get the self-harvesting too. And, there's the ramp system, and there's different ways, because what happens is when the grubs are ready to pupate, they turn a darker color and they crawl out of the bin, and you can direct them to a place, and then you can self-harvest. So now I have my worm bin inside this other big bin, and I just take the whole worm bin out, and then all the pupa are on the ground, and they're drier, and I just pour them in a bucket and then give them straight to the chickens. It's like the coolest thing ever. Now it is time for something to chew on. And that's me. I'll talk about my grubs.
All right, so these are my black soldier fly larvae, which are now in the basement because we are having super cold winter temperatures out here, and they are finishing up. I don't have any new ones coming in yet, any new eggs, any new baby larvae, so the bin is finishing up, but I do want to show you my rig, and you can hear the duck and the chickens over there clamoring at the window because I'm about to feed them. All right, so I have old school worm bin here. I don't think they make these anymore. Quite a bit of moisture in there right now, more than I would necessarily like, but it's okay. I just have an empty one here at the top right now. And here's the active feeding bin, and it looks like they're not really that active right now because there's some food left in there. Like I said, they're kind of finishing up their cycle right now, and you can see them in there on that next layer down. I take this layer off, which is it's a little bit heavy because it's kind of wet. And then there's a little bit of leachate in there. See? It's a little bit of leachate, so I have a little thing over here. I pour it in. And if there's a bunch of grubs or debris in there, you can strain it. There's not much of anything in there right now. And then because I have the worm bin that I use to house the grubs inside this larger bin here, it allows me to collect them self-harvested. So I just have a little of these paper bags in here just in case there's a little bit of extra moisture, sop it up. But so when the larvae go to pupal stage, they crawl out of the bin. And so they crawl out the little holes in the bin, and then they just fall down to this other bin. So it's easy self-harvest. A lot of times you'll hear about ramps and things like that, and I find them to be a little problematic. They don't always work, and this seems to work perfectly. So actually I already have some grubs from yesterday that I haven't fed to the birds yet. So you see them in there. They're just nice and dry when they're in this stage, and they're easy to just pour right out. So I just harvested them. And here we go. And now we can feed them to the chickens and ducks. All right, so they are ready. They are clamoring. The coop here is under my deck, and this is my basement window. So they are up and ready to be fed. And here are the grubs, at the pupal stage that I harvested them from my bin. And here's my little chicken feeder. Right now I just have whole organic wheat in there because this is so much protein, fat, and calcium. I'm not adding anything else to this right now. So what I'll do is I'll just pour them in here. And I think I'll save some of these for later. Give them an afternoon snack. So, there we go. Calm down, girls. Now that is something to chew on.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to stop talking about grubs now. The whole show. Maybe we need to just say, this is the black soldier fly larva episode. But now it is time for the segment on the show called Growing for Real.
The question is rooting hormone the best strategy, or are there alternatives we can use? I personally use the powder because it's pretty bulletproof, but are there other organic and alternative solutions to doing that for stubborn stuff, for cuttings and propagation? So what do you guys think?
Well, I actually use rooting powder myself, and I have tried other things. Willow naturally has rooting hormones in it, and you can basically make like a willow tea from the bark. The more you chop it up and mash it up, the better. And then you can use that, pour that on your cuttings, and it'll help root them for sure. Other plants don't really need it. I propagated Elaeagnus, elderberries, obviously willow. Oh gosh, and several other things with no rooting hormone at all. Literally, I just stick it in, soilless medium, some cocoa peat or something like that, a BX Pro Mix or whatever is made with peat, and just keep them nice and wet and not too hot, not too cold, and they just root on their own. Now, I had a friend tell me this, and I tried it, and I did have a little bit of success with it. But you actually take a piece of aloe, which I grow aloe vera, like the big leaves, and you like chop it up, and you get these little squares, and you literally stick the cutting that you want to root down in the little aloe cube. And aloe naturally apparently has those sort of rooting properties. So,
oh wow,
I never thought of that. Yeah. I didn't realize, because willow makes a ton of sense because it suckers, right? Or just kind of keeps propagating along the bank sort of thing. Makes a lot of sense. For me in Costa Rica, though, I don't, a lot of things you just stick in the ground and it'll take off, and that's kind of, I don't know, maybe there's certain plants that have the same concept as the willow, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I haven't tried a ton of different things here yet, but I'm happy to see a lot. Like actually, you guys have heard of goldenberry, Incanberry. They call it uchuva down here, and I got some cuttings of that, and we put them in the ground, and they took hold. And so to me, it's amazing when you get plants like that. They got to just go to a special list in my book, and okay, these guys are easy to propagate. Let's move them up the list.
That's the invasive list.
Yeah.
well, Lana, do you have any experience with that? You use rooting hormone, right?
Yeah, just the powder, nothing organic, but I love the aloe. That's pretty genius.
So yeah, I guess the issue with the rooting powder is the fact that it's a product you have to buy, and it's somewhat toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're not supposed to get it, where you're supposed to wear gloves and not get it on you and all that stuff. And you're using a tiny amount and whatnot, but yeah, it'd be nice to not have to use it. Brandon, I'm really impressed that you got a goldenberry. I've been growing those for years to root. I grow them from seed, but I've never had them take, rooting. Was it more of a woody cutting, or was it a fresh tender cutting?
Yeah, it was still pretty fresh overall, but a couple of them got dry. They're still hanging on, and then I have a different patch that did a lot better. So they were just kind of like starts. But basically, I'm still kind of trialing it out as far as the two different patches. But yeah, they seem to be doing okay, and I think they're kind of like Solanaceae family, right, or something like that too, right?
Yeah, they're closely related to tomatillos and tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I know that some plants just are, root really well. Like apples, peaches, they don't root. It's very, very difficult, if at all possible, to get those to root. Where like an elderberry, a fig are super easy to root. I've had almost 100% rate with pomegranates, although I did use the rooting hormone. But I've done plenty of things just with nothing, just stick it in the ground. And if it's a plant that likes to, propagate that way or root easily, then it will. I wish, feijoas or pineapple guavas would root more easily. They're very difficult to propagate.
Yeah.
I watched a cool video, kind of a side note, but Kirstin Dirksen's YouTube channel. I like watching that show, and she had Andrew Millison on there, who's kind of guy from Oregon State University, and he had a really cool tour of his property, and he's a big kind of permaculture designer guy, teacher, and so it was fun to see his setup, and he actually had the same ideas, like he had grape all over because he had a corner lot in town, so he had a food forest concept and grapes everywhere, but he did want to have feijoa as sort of a hedge, edible hedge. So yeah, I can put that video in the description too, just in case people want to check that out.
Cool. Yeah, actually, you reminded me, grape is another one that's very easy to propagate through cutting. I've done tons and tons of grape cuttings with no hormone, just sticking them right in.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been another awesome episode of Grow Your Grass Off, and look forward to seeing y'all next time.